Print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More Roadhouse portraits by Rhett Hammerton captured disparate people in the outback. Anyone who's stopped at a roadhouse perched on Australia's most remote highways will know they are unusual checkpoints, temporary meeting places for people with entirely different lives. They can be the lone sign of civilization for hundreds of kilometers in the vast Northern Territory outback, and at their bars are sat long-haul drivers, locals and tourists alike, cold drinks, hot showers. A new photography series by Rhett Hammerton comprises the portraits of more than 120 disparate people as they pass through the highways. The portraits vary widely, some are poker-faced, some seem sorrowful, and all call different places home, but Mr. Hammerton also found details that drew them together. After spending many nights in outback hotels as various projects took him across the territory, Mr. Hammerton came to see them as a microcosm of the NT's diverse, transient and sometimes divided population. In these roadhouse scenarios, you've got people who are grey nomads on their NT adventure, and then you've got people who are just ducking in for a nice coffee because they're working down the road, he said. I find that endlessly fascinating, people moving through the same space but more often than not probably not even acknowledging that they're brushing shoulders with someone who lives a completely different life to them. Mr. Hammerton began traveling with a portable portrait studio. Despite the rough around the edges reputation some of these locations have, most people were happy to sit when approached by him and his assistant Miriam Charlie. People were placed against a tan backdrop and, in the final series, are identified only by their provenance. Locations as vast as Lajamanu, Idaho, synchronicities emerged. People worlds apart who nonetheless made similar choices in their outfits, expressions and body language. Mr. Hammerton began to place the portraits in diptychs side by side. The project was a little bit about moving away from the tradition there seems to be around taking portraits and including stories, he said. I wanted it to be a little more complex, I guess, and a little less easy to read. A finalist in this year's National Portrait Prize shows, on one tile, a bearded man named Dave with a pierced septum and tattoos covering his arms and head. Opposite him is a young indigenous boy named Jonah from Catherine who instinctively sat for the shoot with headphones on. I don't know, there's some visual synchronicity that happened between these two portraits that I found pretty compelling, Mr. Hammerton said of the diptych. I found with Jonah and Dave there's a little hint of attitude. The photographer covered about 2,000 kilometers of the territory, assembling portraits that went on to be shortlisted for photography prizes around the country. He recalled a memorable experience with a stranger at Wycliffe Well, a kitsch, extraterrestrial-themed roadhouse between Alice Springs and Tennant Creek. He was traveling with two of his mates and they all had these massive pelts on and there was no way they were getting away without having their portraits done, Mr. Hammerton said. The other person in the photo, an indigenous woman from Yarralin, had to be contacted by a payphone in her home community so Mr. Hammerton could let her know her portrait had been shortlisted for the bonus photography prize, and despite making a courtesy call to the man, Mr. Hammerton never asked about his pelt. They were on their own adventure, he said. That really sums up what we were looking for in the project, where you just didn't know what goes on. The larger collection is yet to be exhibited but Mr. Hammerton hopes it will one day return to the end.